Now that you've had some practice with law of cosines, we're going to look at the other method for solving non-right triangles, and it's law of cosines. So I think the easiest way to remember law of cosines is by not necessarily memorizing, but in a way being able to kind of memorize and state this statement here. But I did put down the 3 possible formulas you could use as well. Law of cosines is going to be used with side, 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 and side angle sine triangles. To me, I like to draw the triangle and look and ask myself, could I set up a proportion? So in other words, could I use law of sines? And if I can't use law of sines, then I just know to use law of cosines, since those are my only 2 options. But what is the law of cosines? It's going to be the square of any side of a triangle. We're going to square a side, and we're going to set that equal to the sum of the squares of the other 2 sides, subtract 2 times the product of the length of the other 2 sides and the cosine of the angle in between them. It sounds like a lot, but as you get practice with it, I think you're going to realize it's not much harder than law of sines. So again, like law of sines, I'm going to start by drawing my triangle, and there's 2 examples on here, just like before. So here's triangle A, B, C. I label what I'm given. Again, A is across from A, so here's 24. B is 53, and C is 39. So I'm going to have to solve for all 3 of my angles in order to solve for this triangle. So I'm going to have to solve for angle A, angle B, and angle C. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with A. So the only thing I can do is I can use this formula here. And notice I'm going to put alpha in right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that A squared, so 24 squared, so the square of any side is equal to the sum of the squares, so 53 squared plus 39 squared of the other 2 sides, minus 2 times the product of the other 2 sides, so 53 and 39, times the cosine of the angle in between them. Well, notice alpha is in between 53 and 39. So now from here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of add or subtract by subtracting 53 squared and 39 squared from both sides. Giving me 24 squared minus 53 squared minus 39 squared equals negative 2 times 53 times 39 times cosine of alpha. Well, this is all multiplying, so I can divide by that product there. And I'm going to do it to both sides. They will cancel here, leaving me with cosine of alpha. I know to get alpha by itself, I can then take the cosine inverse of both sides. My calculator knows order of operations, so if I put this all into my calculator at once, it's going to do 39 squared divided by negative 2. Then it's going to multiply that by 53 and 39. And then it's going to put that together with 24 squared and minus 53 squared. So I have options here. I can either make sure and include parentheses around the top and around the bottom and then put it all into my calculator at once, or I can do the top and the bottom separate. So I went ahead and I did the top and the bottom separate, and on top I got negative 22, 42 all over negative 41, 34 equals cosine of alpha. So then taking the cosine inverse, and the negative is not necessary since a negative over a negative is positive. And I got an alpha value of about 57.157 degrees. Now I have to solve for beta. To solve for beta, once again, I'm going to use law of cosines. I don't think I gave myself very much room, so I'm going to go ahead and change colors. And I'm going to put my work right in here. So with beta, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say b squared, the square of any side, is equal to the sum of the square of the other 2 sides, so 24 squared plus 39 squared minus 2 times the product of the other 2 sides times the cosine of the angle in between. So I'm going to go through the same steps as I just did. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 24 squared and 39 squared from both sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative 2 times 24 times 39 on both sides. And again, I can either put it on my calculator at once if I use parentheses, or I can do top and bottom separate. I did that, and I got 712 over negative 1872. And the last thing I needed to do was to take the cosine inverse of both sides, giving me cosine inverse of 712 over negative 1872, which I put into my calculator, which gave me a beta value of approximately 112.355 degrees. Now to find gamma, I can do 180 minus 57.157 minus 112.355, and I got a gamma value of 10.488 degrees. And I have now solved that triangle using law of cosines. Doing the same thing in example 2. Example 2 very similar to example 1, except for now I have an angle included where before I didn't. Again, I'll start by drawing out my triangle and labeling what I'm given. A is 34 degrees, and B is 7 inches, and C is 10 inches. So the first thing I would try to do, because again I don't like to memorize which triangles go with which law, is I would try to set up a proportion, but I notice when I do, I'd have to take A and then my unknown A, since this is the only angle I know. If I tried to grab another proportion, I'd have to have another unknown, so I can't solve for two unknowns. So that prompts me to go ahead and use the law of cosines to solve for my missing pieces. So first thing I'm going to solve for is I'm going to solve for A. So the side squared is equal to the sum of the other two sides squared minus twice the product of the other two sides times the cosine of the angle in between. Well, my calculator knows order of operations, so all I have to do is plug this all into my calculator, giving me A squared equals 32.935. Taking the square root, I don't have to worry about plus or minus, as it doesn't make sense to have a negative side length. I get an A value of about 5.739. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and solve for beta. So when I solve for beta, I'm going to have to say that 7 squared is equal to the sum of the other two side lengths squared, so 10 squared plus 5.739 squared minus twice the other two sides, so 2 times 10 times 5.739 times the cosine of the angle in between. So this is now very similar to my other problem, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 10 squared and subtract 5.79 squared. Leaving me with negative 2 times 10 times 5.739 cosine beta, and then I'll divide, giving me 7 squared minus 10 squared minus 5.739 squared all over negative 2 times 10 times 5.739 equals cosine of B. Now once again, I can put this all into my calculator at once, but I have to make sure and put parentheses around the top and parentheses around the bottom. When I did this, I got a value of 0.731. And then finally I took the cosine inverse of both sides. I don't think you're going to be able to see that, so I'm going to do it here. And I got a beta value of about 43.03 degrees after rounding to 3 decimals. The 7 bumps the 9 up. And then to find the last piece, gamma, all I'm going to do is I'm going to do 180 minus the 34 minus the 43.03, giving me 102.97 degrees. And again, I've solved for all the missing pieces of my triangle. So I now know how to do law of sines, proportions, law of cosines. So tomorrow in class, or the next day in class, we are going to talk about some different types of situations we can run into specifically with law of sines, specifically when we look at side-side angle triangles.